All right, well, good morning. We'll kick off our work group meeting this morning. Tom, we didn't receive any public comment for this meeting, correct?
Nope.
All right, great, thanks. So I thought it might be helpful, since Wendy and Jackie are both new members to the work group, if perhaps I just did a quick overview of the recent work that this group had done, and maybe just walk through the memo, and then we can kind of open it up for discussion. Does that sound like a good plan for this morning?
Sure.
Yep.
Great, thanks. So this group had gotten together just probably about maybe, would you guys say about 18 months back now, not quite 2 years ago, to do some housekeeping cleanup to the ordinance. There were some things that, again, just it hadn't really been looked at comprehensively in quite some time. And so I think we did a really good cleanup of the text of the ordinance, and that those amendments were in fact adopted and implemented. But since that time, the state legislature had passed some legislation that would allow a community to increase the limits that we could do for an abatement if we wanted to adopt increased limits. And so one of the things that we did consult with Bob, our town attorney, about was, did we have to go with the full amounts under the legislation? Bob said it's really an up to amount. So I think that's definitely something we should probably talk about at some point this morning, meaning that the increased limits are an up to amount. So we could gradually phase it in. We could choose to increase it, but not to the full extent that's allowable. So there is some flexibility, Bob felt, in the language of the legislation. That's definitely, I think, a policy discussion for us this morning. What we also did is we did update the analysis that Tom had initially put together in January of this year, just because some time had passed and we wanted to make sure that we were working with our most current numbers based on participation levels. So we currently have 62 volunteer firefighters in town who are eligible and participating, and we currently have 10 volunteer ambulance personnel who are participating in the tax abatement program. If we were to ultimately move forward with implementing the changes up to the maximum allowable limit, that would happen over the course of a couple of fiscal years. And at the end of the 3-year implementation of those amounts, it would add, based on current levels of participation, about $60,000 in abatements and an increase in the budget for abatements for our volunteer firefighters, and about an additional $5,000 in cost for our participating volunteer ambulance personnel. So our overall cost over the 3-year period, at the end of that 3-year period, it's about a $65,000 a year additional annual increase. So right now we spend about $65,000 a year. If we were to implement the maximum amounts that are allowable, it would essentially double the cost of the program for us. And so we have that financial data in there for us. Another piece of information and background that I think is helpful is that if we were to move forward with making recommendations to the full Board of Selectmen this fall, and if ultimately any amendments to the ordinance were passed, let's say by around December 1st, that would give our tax office time to adjust the January 1 tax bills. So we would be able to essentially account for it within the current fiscal year if we were to provide the abatement to folks. The challenge being that this wasn't a budgeted expense. So if we were to make a change mid-fiscal year, that's obviously something that we would have a bit of a budget hole for that particular expense. Let's see. I think those are some of the key points that I thought were probably important to cover. And then again, Jim, Gary, Kevin, Karen, since you guys did serve on the last work group, and since the request did come from the fire district, is there any background information that you think would be helpful to add this morning?
Well, this is Kevin Kowalski. I've come back from the retirement thing, as he noted, but I just wanted to give everybody kind of an understanding of why I'm still here. I'm still in the volunteer fire company, which is a totally distinctive, different organization than the fire district. I have retired from the fire district, but still work for Chief Baldus as his deputy on the fire company side of things, on the volunteer side, where I'll continue. And yes, unfortunately, I don't have my notes with me this morning, but I believe it was back in perhaps March or perhaps even February where I sent a kind of an overview of the trade-off on the cost analysis of going with this versus the career fire department. And Maria, I know that you're very familiar with dealing with a career fire department and from Mansfield and the costs associated with that. So when we talk about this type of benefit, it's a very, very small but very appreciative benefit, where the fire district provides some benefits for the membership. They provide no payment other than for jobs that people work part-time for. But for fighting fires, attending drills, no one gets paid for that. None of the firefighters. We use this as one of many little tools to keep our firefighters interested and enhanced. We are able to maintain a very good group, and we can maintain our recruitment efforts, and more so our retention. No one joins the fire company because, oh boy, the town's going to give us $1,000 off our taxes. Not many people do that. I don't know of anybody that does it. What they do is, quite frankly, is out of their goodness of their heart, they're coming to volunteer to help the citizens of town. This year, more so than ever, where we put them into very difficult situations, whether you're an EMT or a firefighter, to work in people's homes, with protection. However, it's still in the back of your mind that, we're going into areas that could be severe, and it may be only just a change of smoke detector battery. So while we've expanded the stress on our guys, we felt that this was going to be a very, very important piece of our retention tool to have this increase. And that's why we were always, trying to push for it, because there was always some thought came out where the firefighter said, well, this came out a year ago. What's going on with it? And we keep saying, well, because of the virus issue, we're unable to meet. And that's where the issues lie right now. So I appreciate the fact that you are looked into it to the point where it will reflect on the January 1st tax bill. And we appreciate the fact that we are, in fact, looking at it now. I don't know if that helps in any way, the background on it, but it is certainly a big influence on retention. I don't know if Jim has anything else.
Yeah, certainly. This is Jim Baldus, and certainly underscore exactly what Kevin says. People don't necessarily join because of that abatement, but I think once they realize the appreciativeness of that the town affords, our citizens and our taxpayers that little benefit, especially over time, it starts to, I think, basically just sets in, I think, a very, very good message that the town does recognize and appreciates exactly what, this community gets from its volunteer force. If you look around us, Simsbury is very, very strong in regards to its volunteer organization, with over, basically 90 members that we have involved. Now, not all of them, are getting the tax abatement, but we certainly have that number of people that we can, utilize during emergencies. And I think this was certainly underscored with the recent tropical storm that came through, to where we don't have to make phone calls to call people in on overtime and so forth to get people to come in to respond to emergencies. We basically just send out, a tone, a message, a radio call, and we can mobilize, 40, 50, 60 people literally within minutes. And you can't do that with any other organization outside of a volunteer organization like this. And the cost for us to do that kind of a mobilization in real cost, when you talk about salaries, is in the millions. We're not talking about small dollar amounts in terms of what it would take for this community to have the level of service and the responsiveness of the service. And I'll refer to a comment that was made by Chief Bolter from the police department during the storm, in terms of how well the volunteer system worked, how we were able to be out in the community and in all sorts of areas of town all at one time, supporting the police, supporting the highway department, and most importantly, supporting the citizens. So I think this tax abatement is certainly well worth it. And I think is a minimal cost to the town in regards to what the actual benefit is.
And I too will add in there, this is Gary Wilcox. I'll add in that the benefit that it gives the volunteers, as Kevin and Jim have said, as far as the retention aspect of it is just immeasurable on that.
If I could add, Maria, too, just to speak a little bit about what Jim alluded to, not everyone gets the benefit, and we are very particular on our rules on that. We are in a process of doing attendance. They have to meet a certain goal, certain response criteria. Additionally, we don't give it to them like other towns do right off the bat as soon as they join. We wait for a particular time of 2 years to see if they will continue on with the program, and we require a lot of work to go forward with these folks. And then at the end of those 2 years, then they start getting a percentage of the amount that they're allowed. And then once they hit a certain, I believe it's 5 years, then they get the full amount. So it's not something that we just give right off the bat as soon as they sign the papers. And that's a very, very important fact, where probably 20% of our group may not last for 2 years. It may not last for 3 years. If they find out that this is not for them, then they will leave, and that's fine, because we want people that are totally invested in the program and in doing the job. And that's when we start giving it out. And we're very particular, like I said, with attendance. If they don't meet the attendance, they don't get the tax abatement. That's as clear as we can get. And that does result in better attendance, and it does result in a better process.
Good morning, this is Karen Stewart from the ambulance. I want to just underline 10 times what everybody's been saying. We're the same way with the ambulance. They have to make a commitment to be with our association. We're not giving this benefit out willy-nilly, so to speak. If you see our list, the members that are getting this benefit are a minimum of 5 years of membership and committing to our minimum requirements for hours for volunteering. So I can only underscore what everybody's been saying with the fire department. We are in the same position. We're very particular about our members and who commits to it. You'll find that all of them are town residents. They own property in town. So this is a huge benefit to them to help with their taxes. And so I can only say that this program has been a good incentive to have, and I would like to see it stay in place. And if we can give our members just a little bit more, I think it's a very worthwhile cause to give, because they're invaluable to us on our end as well as they are to the fire department. So that's my input on this. Thank you.
Great, thanks everybody for that background. At this point, I think it would make sense to turn it over to Jackie and Wendy for any maybe questions, feedback, comments that you might have.
Do you want to go for? I have a couple questions, of course. And there's background noise. If you hear it, I'm in my yard. So it apparently it's been steady at the 1,500, the current rate for 15 years. Is that what I read correctly?
No, the maximum is 1,000 presently.
Yeah. So, and it's been that's what it's been for. It hasn't been increased for 15 years.
No, that's correct.
Okay. So I did read that. And then, so the proposition really is for 2020, to increase by 500 and 250. And then the other piece is by 2022 to go up another 500 to 250 for each breakdown on class. The one question I have again is really geared to Maria. Melissa, is what's the hit on the budget this year? Obviously, I don't think anybody would disagree that it's not deserved, this money, for the amount of work that you guys do and what were the value to the town. So I'm just looking from, the current year budget issues, how would we cover that, I guess? And then it's kind of a catch-22. We want to reward the service because of the pandemic, yet we're going to face a tough budget year because of the pandemic. So that's kind of that's a tough situation. So that's one thing. And then the other question I have is there any other funding sources? I don't know where the money goes. I'm new. Like, I don't even know the difference between fire district and fire company, but I do know that there's I think it's a fire district tax. I believe that's what it is for the, whatever resources the fire department needs. And if there's any possible cost sharing capability in there so that we could either give the full amount, or phase it in or something like that. So that I didn't really say anything tangible. I'm just throwing out kind of the thoughts that are going through my mind as someone new to this.
Sure, Wendy, I can answer a couple of those questions for you. So the impact on the fiscal 2021 budget, if we were to implement it this year, our estimate is that it would be about a $33,500 unbudgeted impact to the current fiscal year. A couple of possibilities might be if there are some year-end savings at fiscal year-end close next year, perhaps to make it up that way. Otherwise, if our overall expenditures exceed revenues, then we would have to unfortunately, look to fund balance to close that gap. We do know we have a small number of, at this point in time, unbudgeted pandemic-related expenses, some of which won't probably be reimbursable from FEMA or this federal government or state government. A couple of those being the pool deficit, which we talked about pretty extensively in open session for opening for pool season. And then the absentee balloting process. So much was shifted from the Secretary of State's office to our town clerk's offices. And so that's quite a Herculean effort, both in time and resources. Just for example, we just had to place an order for actual ballots yesterday, and just the ballots alone was $11,000. So we'll have some reimbursements coming from the state for that, but just for example, the primary, they only reimbursed us $2,500. So I think at this point in time, those are probably two areas that I see the town, again, just having some unforeseen pandemic-related expenses that weren't budgeted. The schools will as well. But again, on the other hand, we'll probably have some small savings related to pandemics, services that aren't being provided because of the pandemic. But again, it's so early in the fiscal year, it's kind of hard to say how, fiscal year end next, at the end of the current fiscal year, how that's going to look. But again, I think our estimates are pretty decent. And again, it will probably be about a $33,000 expense we would need to try and cover somehow.
Right,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Melissa.
I was just going to say, just to clarify, and it wouldn't be on the expense side, right? It would be a revenue. So we'd be looking, this isn't on the expense side of the budget. We're not adding something to the expense side. We're just saying we're going to receive this much less revenue, right? Is that the way to think of it?
Yeah, that's probably a good way to characterize it.
So we'd be short on that side, if at all.
Yeah, that's a better way to characterize it. Thank you. And then just another quick question, Wendy, you had in terms of other sources. We had checked with Bob in terms of, is this something that potentially, the town could share in the cost with the fire district or the ambulance association or both? And he did say that we could, if that was something that they were interested in doing, if they had, the budget capacity to be able to help out with the cost of the program, that if we went down that path, he thought just through some sort of memorandum of agreement or understanding that one or both entities, could, potentially agree to reimburse the town for some portion of the expenses. So that would, I think, probably be really the only other potential revenue source. And that would just be if they had the funds available to help out with the cost of the program.
Okay, and this is Gary. One of the things that we have done too with the district over the years, and when this program was initially implemented many years ago, it was an agreement with the town that this was basically the town's portion of giving benefit to the firefighters directly. And there are many things that the fire district and the town do work together so that we do benefit each other. And maybe one of the best examples is the recent MOU that we agreed upon with the use of our cell and phone towers, where the police department is upgrading their radio system, and they're going to be utilizing the use of our towers with no extra cost to the town on that. And that was actually quite a cost savings, so that the PD did not have to construct their own radio towers. So things like that we do to be able to work together and minimize costs going back and forth.
I have a couple other questions. Jackie, if you want to cut in, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll go after you.
Well, the other question was, so the 2000, the 2022, there's nothing projected after that, correct? So they're saying the max, I'm just going to look at the 5-year, the max is 2K, and it could be after 2022, correct? Like that's when you can implement it. So you don't have to take the full, if we decide to spread it out or something like that, you don't have to take the full hit that year, because there's nothing after that, right? So that we know of. So
No,
that's
everything will be incrementally. I mean, it's all done legislatively for the amounts. So it would have to go, and I don't anticipate they would increase that. I mean, they may wait another 15 years to do it. Where, they would increase it. And really, it's almost based on inflation, where the original amount, and if you take 15 years of inflation, you're about at this amount that were the offer is. And so it seems logical to grant this, and then 3 years later increase it again to the maximum. They understood the town's issues on the legislative side, to say that we don't want to hit it all at once, because that was one of the initial bills. We'll phase it in over a 3-year period, and that'll be a little bit easier on the communities to afford. And that was the potential there. I know, because I was at the Capitol during the time that this was being processed through. So that's an important factor, is that, we're looking at a percentage here. And if you look at comparison, and it is based on uncollected revenues versus budgeted revenues, it's a little bit different. I mean, money's money, don't get me wrong. But it's just, it's a little bit different. And I was involved with the original ordinance back 15 years ago. And it was actually clearly the town's standard that it was their call on it. And it was their funds that will do it. And they made that. Now things change, but that was their standard. That was the standard of the group at the time. The district provides other services. We pay the town for other things. To add what Gary was mentioning of the pending agreement, MOU, we also pay for a percent of the central dispatch. So there are things that we do pay for the community, where it's, addressed for the emergency response of the community. And I think it's an excellent partnership with the town. But at this point, this was a town abatement, and this has always been kept a town abatement. So, and I think, and I won't speak for the ambulance, but for them to pay their I can't speak to their finances, but this may be an impact for them, and I think it'll be a little bit difficult. So, to have them equally put in towards the tax abatement.
Okay.
So that could be difficult too. So I mean, it's and I'm not underestimating the amount that we're giving. It is great, but I think at this point, if you do the amount that we're considering here is not a huge amount for what we're getting. It's just,
Right.
I can't understate that.
Yep.
And I don't know if you had a question about the difference between the district and the company. The
Yeah,
fire company, the fire company is actually an incorporated not business, but a corporation. It was formed in 1944 when the state said you can have a fire district, but you also have a separate organization that will provide the manpower to fight fires. And the district will essentially, I should say, contract for $0 to have these people be the firefighters, and the district will manage the equipment and the buildings, and that's what they do. And any of the career side, such as the fire marshal's office, the dispatchers, the mechanics to maintain the trucks, the maintenance division to maintain the firehouses, that's all district taxpayer money. And the district does not pay the fire company anything to provide the services of firefighting to the membership or the fire company. The company separate, you get a letter each year asking for donations to support the fire company. That's all separate from the fire district, has nothing to do with the fire district. And that's what operates the backbone of the fire company incorporated to run the fire company, the manpower. So that's it's the same thing as the fire company has a building on Town Forest Road that it takes care of itself. No tax dollars take care of that. And that's an important factor, that there's a very big difference between the two. I mean, they work as a partnership, a very good partnership, but it's totally separate. I'm not sure if that answers your question about the two.
It's good for now, but thank you.
Okay.
Maria, I just wanted to jump in. This is Jackie. I have a different perspective, and I am very familiar with the fire department as well as the fire district. And I see the value of having our 90 member volunteers that, like the chief said, in a response to a storm, just come out immediately, and the value of this abatement for retention, for keeping these guys who show up Monday after Monday for mandatory drills. They show up on weekends for extra training and drills. And these guys, I mean, the men and women that do this and put in countless volunteer hours, this abatement is a very small token that the town gives them to acknowledge, thank you for your hours of leaving your families. Thank you for coming out in the rain and the storm and pumping out somebody's basement. Thank you. And I would say the same. I was just on the receiving end of the ambulance, and I can't speak highly enough for how trained they are. And we are so lucky to have them. So I would be in favor of this abatement. And if it does need to go, in increments to being increased, that's understandable. Absolutely. But the value of retaining these volunteers, we can't put a price on that.
Thanks for those comments, Jackie. This is Jim Baldus again. I also just want to basically underscore, I think I guess if you will, I'm not sure if I'm using the word correctly, but the fragileness of the volunteer organizations. I think Karen can probably speak to that directly in the fact that she has obviously seen, challenges in terms of maintaining volunteers over the years, as the commitment that the volunteer person has to make to training, to certifications, and so forth. The department is no different in that regard. And I think that it's very easy to see, dwindling volunteerism in communities. Like I said, Simsbury is very, very fortunate, but you don't have to look very far within the Farmington Valley to see, fire departments who are struggling to get members. We continue to be very strong. I think that speaks very highly of the commitment that the town through the fire district and the town of Simsbury, has provided and underscored its commitment to its residents and those volunteers, not only in the fire service, but also in the ambulance association, to, providing their time, their willingness, and basically with a little bit of a thank you to what they provide in terms of their heart to this community. So, I do think we have to remember that the issue of a volunteer is still that foundation, and we want to maintain that. It's important for us to maintain it. I think you get improved and better service when you're doing it that way, instead of doing it for a paycheck. And I think we should do everything we possibly can to try to maintain, the level of volunteer organizations that we have in this community.
This is Gary, and I'll add something to that, Jim, too. Nationally, there has been a decline in volunteerism in many aspects, not just the fire service, but fire service specifically is one that across the board has, as you say, Jim, has been struggling with keeping their volunteers. And fortunately, the Simsbury Volunteer Fire Company has put emphasis into their recruitment and retention. And we have been able to stay ahead of the curve, unlike some of our neighboring towns, which have fallen behind the curve. And once you fall behind that curve, it's even harder to get back on top. And then, unfortunately, you very quickly face the reality of being or forced to starting to phase in a paid staff on that, and then your costs are out of control. So to put these into perspective, as far as the amount of dollars that are being put in for this abatement can really assist us in staying ahead of that curve, and rather than falling into the hole, which many others have done, unfortunately.
Sure, and just kind of looping back to, I think both Jackie and Wendy had mentioned, a potential concept of, even if we needed to sort of more gradually implement, the increases just to smooth out the increase a little bit from a budgeting perspective. So just for example, if we were to smooth it out, so maybe over a 4-year period as a 3-year period, and, sort of do it more in half, if you will, in terms of the allowable amounts. If you were to do year 1, say $625 and then $1,250, depending on length of service. Year 2, $750, $1,500. Year 3, $875 and $1,750, and then year 4, working up to $1,000 and $2,000. So that's just a for example. I mean, we could do a lot of different scenarios. That one was just sort of neat and tidy in terms of breaking it in half, if you will, and just smoothing it out over a 4-year period, as opposed to really kind of taking the budgetary hit largely in 2 fiscal years. This would again smooth it out over 4. And again, we could run a bunch of different scenarios. So if that's something that you're interested in seeing some different scenarios, or in concept, if you like this idea, perhaps of maybe smoothing out over a 4-year, we could definitely put something on paper just for you to take a look at.
Maria, this is Kevin. Just one thing I do want to add, and that is I don't want this group to underestimate the symbol of this program and the amount that we value our volunteers at. Is it worth essentially you're talking about in a phase-in approach, is it worth the $8,000 in a $40 million budget? Is it worth the $13,000 that we would hold back on a benefit over a 3-year period or a 4-year period? I really don't think that but what it does is it sends a signal back to the volunteers that they're not going to give you the full amount that's been allowed by law. They're going to give you a percentage of that. And we'll explain that it's a budgeted issue. And I guess, our folks are pretty smart, and they're going to say, well, yeah, but, this is something that we're doing. And, we're only going to get a small percentage of it. And, you know, that's not, I know that it was, when we first started the program, it was a 200, 400, 600, 800, 1,000. That was back 15 years ago. And that did create a bit of a spark, so to speak, and a little bit of misunderstanding back to the troops when it was first implemented. But you know, we went with it, and we did okay. I'm just kind of, you know, cautious that, you know, we send a signal back to say that you know, we have this amount, but we're not going to give it all to you. You know, it's not like a contract. You know, it's not like a, you know, this means something to the individual more than the money, believe it or not. You know, because that's what we hear as members. Just as a point.
I was going to just add, so I feel like my thought on this is, you know, it's been 15 years where you haven't gotten a raise, basically, right? So, you know, I'm thinking it would be, given you know, what everybody's been through this past year, and if we can live without receive a little less, taking out of our revenue, basically the 33.5, I think it is, and then potentially phase in the 2022 increase over a couple years, so it's not as, you know, it's like you haven't got anything in 15 years, so let's give you guys what's allotted from the state, you know, because we can now, and then take the next increase and do it over 2 years as a phased in that way kind of thing. And I mean, I don't want a nickel and dime, obviously, which we kind of doing, because nobody knows what this year is going to look like financially. But I do think that for 2020, you know, after what's happened and without the increase for so long, that it would be, as you're saying, Kevin, it would be a, you know, here's something from the town. We appreciate you for everything you've done. And, you know, we can give you this now. And then the next increase we'll do over even 2021, 2022, or 2022, 2023, something like that. Is that, you know, would that be a good sign to the fire company district and the ambulance? I just don't, you know, financially, I'm just trying to look out. It's not a lot of money, but it's just another option rather than the lower for the first year, like to just come out with the full amount in the first year and then phase the rest in.
Well, if I can speak, this is Gary, if I can speak to that a little bit, Wendy, I think that this is already a phased in approach, because the legislature wanted to bring it up to the 2,000 where it needs to be, but they had said, let's bring it in so it's not as much of a burden, bring it up to 15 and then go up to the 2,000. So yes, and as has been said before, that I guess you folks could phase it in however you'd like, but I think that the program has already been set, and if you do phase it in further, then that's just going to send a little bit of a little less of a thank you message back to the volunteers who have worked so very hard and are very deserving of this benefit. And keep in mind that in one day of that storm that we had, those volunteers went out over 100 times in one day. And so hopefully everybody can keep this into perspective as far as what the money is, what the size of the money is, and how minuscule that is as compared to what the real value is that this town of Simsbury and the residents and the taxpayers of the town of Simsbury receive from their volunteers.
Got it.
So this is just Jim Baldus again. If I understand this correctly, and please correct me if I'm understanding this wrong. If we implement the full amount, and Maria, from what you had said, you were talking about putting this into effect for January 1st for the tax payments for January 1st. That $500 increase would also be in effect for the tax bill for next July 1st. And then it would be the following year, 2022, then we would see the additional 500 go into effect to bring it up to the 2,000 limit, Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, yeah, I think that you and I are saying the same thing, right? So that again, if the board takes action on this late fall, again, our tax collector can make an adjustment. So essentially, that folks would be able to receive the benefit for the current fiscal year, and that would be done through a proration, essentially, of the January tax bill. So then they would then again be eligible on July 1st for the 21-22 installment. And then again on July 1st for the 22-23 installment. And the 22-23 installment is where, under the legislation at that point in time, we could go up to that fully maximum allowable amount.
Okay. Okay. So the budget impact then would be basically for the, as you say, for this fiscal year and for next fiscal year at the $500 mark. And then it would be the following year, there would be another $500 mark. So that,
Right.
there's time. There's time to kind of figure it out and absorb the revenue loss.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I definitely would agree. Then we should probably just do both. You know, the $500 increments as stated, as basically as allowed.
In terms of next steps, again, I think turning it back over to Jackie and Wendy would be, do you both feel that you need a bit more time just to kind of, digest and process everything you heard today? Is there any additional financial analysis you would like staff to do? Do you want to regroup with this group one more time before you bring a recommendation forward to the Board of Selectmen? Where are you guys sort of landing on how comfortable you are with proceeding or needing a bit more time to digest and gather more information?
We had started this process before the pandemic, so I'm pretty comfortable. We had talked about the numbers then, and like Chief said, I would be comfortable implementing the stepped increments the way that the state has it laid out.
I am obviously, I would like to do the phase one, like on that timeline. Again, I'm just worried about what things are going to look like this year for everyone. So that's my only drawback. If we can deal with the loss of revenue this year, or we can take care of that loss of revenue this year, or eat it somehow. And then give us a little time to recover. I don't know what the next year is going to be like in the year after. I was thinking do the phase one and then do phase two in 2 steps maybe, but I'm not sold on that because what I'm hearing is I wouldn't want to hurt morale and I would like to reward our company. So it's just a matter of financially how we make this work and if we can make it work.
Yeah, what I can do, which we often do when, we're putting together cover memos for the board packets, is we'll often present scenarios and options, and we'll include the financial analysis. And so what we could do for the packet is essentially show the 2 scenarios. One, right, if we were to just implement as outlined by the legislature, which would essentially most significantly impact fiscal 21 and fiscal 23. So we could show that as, one scenario, and then we could show a second scenario, which is what, Wendy had just described, which is do the maximum allowable amount now for fiscal 21 and 22. And then for the next increment to do that over a 2-year period as a 1-year period. And splitting the difference. So we could definitely show those 2 scenarios just as options for the larger group, since there has been discussion around both of the options today. That would be very easy for us to do for the packet.
And are we scared? Is there a stagnant year in here that there's no increase between, right?
That's correct. That would be fiscal 21-22.
So what I'm thinking, right? So I would say, why wouldn't we do the full and then use the 21-22, the 22-23 instead of just doing it all in? Oh, we can't do that, right? We have to wait till 20. Sorry, my math is off there. So yeah, I was thinking to just spread it out evenly, but we couldn't start spreading it out evenly till 22-23 and then the next year.
Right, which is 3 years out yet. So hopefully we'll have enough understanding of the financial forecasting by that particular point in time to be
Right.
able to weather that additional $500. That was the big point. And then it's also addressed on how many members we have. I mean, it could be less members, which reflects on it. We go up and down. So if we have new members, they won't come on the roster for tax abatements for 2 years. So, that has a lot to do with it also. So, that part will have, I appreciate, what you're talking about as far as rewarding the folks this
That are
year,
there.
because that are here and
Yeah.
and after 15 years, not getting an increase and giving it to them for 2 years, but we have 2 years in which we can forecast the change to the next increment. It's actually 3 years out. So we will have an understanding of what that's all about. So, I mean, if it was 1 year and then the next year, right back to back, I would say, maybe we can incrementalize it. But, for the purpose of this is 3 years out. So, I think that if we just allow the legislative act to work, I think that's that would be acceptable. And that's an outstanding statement to the membership.
Okay. So again, Wendy and Jackie, for again, next steps, it sounds like you'd be comfortable with recommending the increases to the Board of Selectmen. And then for the purposes of the cover memo, we'll just show the 2 scenarios. And that way the full board can have a conversation about comfort level with proceeding more aggressively versus less aggressively. Does that make sense for a good next step?
Yes, I'd be ready to present it to the board for our next meeting.
Oh, Jackie, we have a really, really, really cramped agenda for the 14th. So I think probably the earliest would be September 28th.
Okay, and that gets us time to have
It definitely gives us time. Yeah, September 28th or even the first meeting in October would give us sufficient time. But since you guys, it sounds like probably don't need a second meeting, we could probably, expedite this and push it to the second meeting in September. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the 29th. We had to change it to the 29th. So, yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Great. All right. Super. The only other thing that you had on your agenda were the minutes from the last time that the work group met, which was April 2nd. I think that because it was so long ago, folks have changed. If generally, folks feel pretty comfortable with that, I'd probably say, Chief Baldus, Gary, Kevin, Karen, if you think that they look pretty reflective of what was discussed, we could just simply say that the minutes were approved by consensus. But I don't know if folks who were there had any concerns about the minute.
That sounds fine with me. This is Kevin.
Yeah, this is Jim. I'm comfortable with it.
Yes.
Great. Excellent. Wonderful. All right. Well, before we adjourn, does anybody else have anything to add before we sign off?
I want to thank the group for all the work on getting this done. It'll make a difference. Thank you.
It will.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you all.
And we have to thank you too for taking care of us during that outage and through the pandemic. So thought I'd throw that in there.
And certainly, Wendy, as you, anytime, we're more than willing and available to help in terms of, better educating and understanding some of the processes and also some of the organizational differences that we have here. So we're certainly, open to that, and just say the word, we'll get together.
I really met you guys in person, I don't think, other maybe than Kevin. So one of these days.
We will.
Yeah, you can
Sounds
stop
good.
by. We can take you around. I got a lot of time.
Okay.
Nice, Kevin.
All righty.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time. We really appreciate it. And we do, truly appreciate everything, that the ambulance volunteers and the fire, volunteers do for our community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Take
All
care.
right. Bye now.
Bye.